Welcome to the Adapt, Pivot, and Persist series. This is a four-part series for career reinvention amidst recent layoffs and the current climate. Again, this is part 3 of 4. Today, we're talking about tactical actions, retooling documents, and interview prep. If you missed any of our part 1 or part 2, which was about really changing your mindset for forward movement and branding, all the recordings are posted on our webpage that we've put into the chat. But today, let's move forward. We have Caitlin Broccoli, who is from the Whitting School of Engineering, and Gabrielle Stiles, who is from the Carey Business School, to share with you today. And with that, I turn it over to you two.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And thank you all for being here. We're really excited to share some practical actions that you can all take with these next steps of yours. So just to go over an overview of the session, we are going to talk a little bit about practical updates to your resume and refreshing on interviewing, types of interviewing, and how you can best prepare for upcoming interviews that you might all be receiving. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So just to get started, we're going to start off with resumes. So resume overview, they are required for any experience that you're going to be going for, whether that's full-time jobs, research opportunities, you're going to have a resume. So you're translating all of your experiences that you've had in prior positions to do two things. One, get through through applicant tracking software. And applicant tracking software is the software that employers use to scan resumes. Since they're getting thousands and thousands of applications per job, they have to have a way to initially scan and get a nice compilation to pass along to a hiring manager. And so that's what they use this software for, that will scan your document for keywords. And the second thing that you want to be able to translate your experiences to is the recruiter and the hiring manager themselves. So those are the two things you want to be thinking about. Does it have the keywords, and will my document speak well to a recruiter that's looking to pass this along to the hiring manager? So while you're doing this, you're going to ask yourself, why would X employer want to know or need to know this about me on my document? And we're going to talk a little bit as we go on about translating your experiences, transferable skills, and we're going to dive into a few examples as well. Okay, the next slide. Just to touch upon the key differences between resumes and CVs, as this question often comes up a lot. So resumes are typically 1 page, 2 pages max, depending on your level of experience. And you're emphasizing skills, and you're using this for industry, nonprofit, public sector jobs. CVs, on the other hand, don't have a page length. They can be as long as you need them to be, and it's focused more on your academic accomplishments. You're applying them to use for academic positions, fellowships, grants, research positions often will request a CV as well. And you're emphasizing your academic accomplishments more prominently than your industry-based skills. You're always going to start with your education on your CV. When it comes to your resume, once you've graduated, depending on how many years out, you will be focusing more on your work experience. So that can often come prior to your education listed on your resume in terms of order of your summaries or order of your titles. All right. Next up. Okay, so while we're talking about these career transitions, pivots, as you're updating your current resume, you want to reflect a little bit on some values here. So before you do anything to your resume, you want to reflect on what accomplishments you're most proud of. So are there things in prior roles that you are particularly proud of? Was there anything in that work environment that really helped you thrive? What challenges have you overcome? What did they teach you? And when have you, if you look at all of the roles that you have on your resume, highlight some of those roles that have given you the most motivation. You have felt like you have thrived in those roles. If you have statements of things that you've done on your resume, what are the ones that you have felt most engaged in? So this is just a little bit of a reflection exercise that I usually recommend anybody do before updating their document and resumes, because what's going to be more important as we move forward is now how do I tailor all of this information to a job description that I find, because I'm going to tailor this for every job that I apply for. All right, next slide, please. All right, let's dive a little bit into transferable skills. So everybody has what's called transferable skills. Many of you probably may already know this already, but you're going to definitely want to highlight these transferable skills as you're making a career pivot or career change. So that would involve identifying core competencies. So this involves both your technical skills and your soft skill development. You're going to reframe your experience, particularly on your resume or in a cover letter, to align with the requirements of this new role or this new industry. So I gave an example on this slide so that you can see what I'm talking about. If you're planning to move from, say, a marketing role to a product management role, a transferable skill that you might have would be understanding consumer behavior and working cross-functionally. Those are what we would call transferable skills, or those soft skills, interpersonal skills that have helped you thrive potentially in more technical industries, depending on what industry you're coming from. You're going to want to focus on achievements. So don't get too caught up on previous job titles that you've held. You are going to want to focus more on what you accomplished in that role. And we'll move into that in a second. So focus more on achievements and provide concrete examples of how these translate into results. So that is going to give not just, we talked about the tracking software scanning your document for keywords. Here we're really focusing on the recruiter that's going to be reading that document. So how do these concrete examples translate for success in this role that you're now going to be applying for? And you can do that by providing concrete examples. All right. Perfect. So let's talk about what you would do next in terms of your resume document. So you're going to create an everything resume. Many of you may already have this already, but this is a master document of all of your experiences that you've had. So this will include your education, all of your work experience, which will include internships, research, part-time jobs, every experience that you've had, activities, leadership experience, your skills. And then you're going to write what we call effective bullet point statements or accomplishment statements for each of these positions that you've held. The easiest formula that I like to use with working with folks is the what plus the how and plus the outcome. So this is going to help you get to that concrete example that again is going to translate to that recruiter reading that document. So what you did, how did you do it, and what the outcome was, what was the result? And you're always going to start with that action verb to describe the what. So this master document is going to serve as your reference for when you're tailoring and drawing experiences for your resumes that you're going to apply to all of these following roles that you're looking for. Which leads us to this prioritize and tailoring. This is a key component. If you're sending out the same resume, you're likely not going to get any callbacks for interviews because of that applicant tracking software. It's very important to tailor it. And again, not just tailor it for that, but tailor it for the recruiter. So for each job, you're going to look at your everything resume and select the most relevant experiences to the job description that you're looking at. So you're going to tailor the descriptions and highlight the skills to that job description. We'll talk about keyword optimization in a little bit, but there are definitely ways that you can utilize AI to help you with this. There are tools out there that will also be able to scan your resume against a job description to help you maximize those keywords. If you don't want to use some AI or different software platforms to help you with that, what you're really going to focus on are those top 3 responsibilities in a job description. And Michelle, I saw you pop right up. Is there a question for us?
There's a question from another Michelle.
Okay.
So the question is, how can we leverage transferable skills when the job posting is asking for over 5 years of experience? Oh, it went to another category. Okay. To another 5 years of experience with specific job titles. the rumor of the recruiters spending about 6 seconds to look at resumes, focusing on job titles, companies, and years you have on a resume. So can you just talk more about that 6 seconds of, reviewing a resume and how to really capture the recruiter's attention?
Were these two questions, Michelle, or the same question?
Same question.
Same question. So
Yeah, so
when it
leveraging,
comes,
how can we leverage transferable skills when job posting is asking very specifically for specific job titles, 5 years of experience,
yep.
and then that quick scan that they do.
Yeah. So with the job descriptions, in my personal opinion, and Gabrielle, please feel free to chime in as well, but in my experience, the job descriptions are guidelines. And so these come directly from a hiring manager. So that may be their ideal candidate has 5+ years experience with these job titles, but that doesn't mean that every single person that applies is going to fall into that category. And so you will, I would say, still apply for those positions because they are guidelines. I recommend tailor as much as you can and then let them be the ones to say no, don't take yourself out of the running by not applying. That's my personal opinion with that because every job description can be very vague, it could be very specific. It really just varies. And like you're right, the recruiter looking at it for 6 seconds is definitely lower than it was when I when I got out of college, and it was more like 30 seconds. But that 6-second scan, you want whatever's the most relevant toward the top of the page of that resume, because if you have more relevant experience at the bottom, just because of how you've created your resume, what order, if you've used a functional resume, if you've used a chronological resume, it's going to depend on what they see first, and you want whatever's most relevant to them at the top. And I don't know if you have any other insight on that, Gabrielle, but that would be how I would answer that.
Yeah, I think the keyword optimization that Caitlin's going to get into later on is what I would focus on as well for transferable skills. Because in addition to that 6-second glance, you have to get through the applicant tracking system. So that is, to Caitlin's point, throw your hat in the ring, let them tell you no, but focus on those keywords because that's going to get you to the first hurdle that you have to navigate. And then if your experiences are prioritized, as Caitlin said, hopefully that 6 to 10 second glance will yield a positive outcome.
And always have other people review your resume before you submit it for a job description, even if it is a friend, a colleague, former colleague, have them look at it, let them see the job description and see if they would, what they catch about it. And an example I have of this is somebody that I worked with was applying for a social impact role that required international experience, and it required communication experience abroad. And I looked at my friend, and she completely left off her entire experience over over abroad. And I, as somebody reviewing that and looking at what she was applying for, I said, hey, don't you think that this experience is really transferable to this role that you're applying for? And she had forgotten that she had even done it. And so sometimes those people that are closest to you know you and are able to say, hey, I think you should include this because it really does show your qualifications for that role. It is hard because these job descriptions and resumes are subjective. And so these are, again, general guidelines. But the best that you can do is keyword optimization and having people review it, and then also keeping that most relevant experience toward the top. Great question. All right, quantifying and showcasing impact. So this goes back to providing those concrete examples of results. So how do these results that you've had in previous roles assist or help this company or organization that you're going to be applying for? So as you review it, you're going to be looking at what action verbs are they using for their responsibilities section? What especially pay attention to, what are they saying in terms of soft skills are they looking for? Because a lot of times if you're applying for a technical role, those technical skills can be the same for a lot of positions that you're applying for, but those soft skills that they say in a job description could be very, very greatly. And an example of that is one description might use teamwork, one description might use cross-functional collaboration. They all mean the same thing, but these are keywords that employer has deemed appropriate to be on that resume. So that's what they'll be scanning for. And whenever you can utilize numbers to quantify impact, that is definitely something that we would recommend. So did you improve something by 25%? How many people did you work with in a team? You know, anything like that that you can quantify is going to be very helpful. All right, next. Okay, so how we would craft this. Action, project, result, and then we're going to go into relationship. The relationship piece is how does this relate to the job description? So first we're going to look at, we're going to highlight our skills. We're going to select a strong action verb. We're going to identify what the project is that I did, and then you're going to articulate the outcome. The relationship piece of this, and I'll give an example in the upcoming slide, is to what degree does this relate to the organization that you're applying for? And why don't we just jump right into that piece? So the next slide is going to give this example. On the left here, you can see what's on this person's master resume document. So going back to that document that has all of your experience listed, where you're updating your bullet point statements for every position you've had. This here on the left is what somebody had on their resume. So partnered with the Center for Social Concern Community Involvement Committee to increase student volunteers from 160 to 350 members by integrating CSC programming with an online conferencing platform. So this is what their bullet point statement said. Now, in the middle, you're going to see what this person is applying for. They're applying for a Java and GitLab software engineer role, and it lists one of the responsibilities as integrate existing software into a new or modified system or operating environments. In the description, that's what it says. So this person has now taken what's on their master document, taken the job description, and revised this to have a relational accomplishment statement. So how does it relate to this job description? And it has now changed to this statement on the right. Integrated existing programmatic content for the Center of Social Concern into a new online system for conferencing using Java and C++, increasing student volunteers from 160 to 350 members. So this is just hopefully a clear example of how what you have on your current resume based on a job description can then translate into a new relational accomplishment statement and how you're highlighting those transferable skills. So this person is working with a nonprofit, but might be applying for a role that's not nonprofit related, but their transferable skills are in that statement so that it showcases impact and how that can benefit the organization that they're now applying for or applying to. All right, next slide. Keyword optimization. So some things to take a look at. As you're looking at job descriptions. JobScan is a tool that you can utilize where you can update your resume and a job description, and it'll actually scan it for you. And then there is a QR code there. You can see a sample ChatGPT prompt where you are posting or what the prompt is into ChatGPT to see what the generating the top 10 keywords from this job description that you would like to see on a resume. ChatGPT can help you. But again, you can also do it on your own where you're utilizing, highlighting those action verbs they're using, the soft skills, what technical skills they have in their required qualifications, but also remembering that the required qualifications, these are guidelines too. So still apply for these jobs, even if you don't necessarily meet every single qualification on that job. Okay, I think that was my last, was that my last slide? Yes. Awesome. I know that was a very quick overview of resumes and updating them, but I am going to pass it off to Gabrielle to talk about interviewing so that we have time for more Q&As at the end.
Thank you, Caitlin. And as we know, the resume's job is to get you the interview, so that dovetails perfectly into our next portion of our presentation. So, like any skill, interviewing requires practice. It's a muscle that you have to flex often to feel more comfortable. We know the nerves never go away, So you go through the process, you get the interview, there's excitement, there's nerves, there's talking about yourself. There's all these things you have to consider as you're preparing for interviewing and talking about yourself. So some things that you might keep top of mind is how well do you know yourself? How well you know yourself can help you feel more comfortable talking about yourself. How well you know the company and the role. Do your due diligence. Make sure that you're researching the company and reviewing the job description as much as possible. I know for myself in particular, I like to have a hard copy of a job description and literally write out my skills in comparison to what they're asking me for, so I can really know how I fit within this role in this company, so that I can answer that last question of how well do I know how my skills can be leveraged for this new opportunity. So that gives you a little bit more confidence going into the interview. Like, okay, now I know myself. I know how I fit within this company, or I know how I can make sense of this role, but it still requires practice. So as I just touched on, you want to conduct your research, but not only just the job and the company, but you want to learn more about the culture. What's their mission? Any recent developments? And where are you getting your news from? So are you following them on social media platforms? Are you using Google Alerts so you can be alerted of any new developments that are happening in the company or organization? How about networking? Who are folks that you can reach out to that might be able to provide some additional context into the company and their culture or their values? Perhaps LinkedIn connections, maybe even Glassdoor. They always leave some good reviews or some useful tools that can be taken into consideration as you're doing your research. And as you are collecting and compiling that information, you're going to use that to shape your responses. And that might really help you iron out your value add to this organization, or make you even more excited about the opportunity as far as what you can look forward to if selected to join the team. We've all had interviews before, so this slide just serves as a reminder of common interview types. So you get that interview ask or request. You might have that initial phone screener with HR, but then you're going to have the next round is going to have a variety of options that could potentially play out for you. So we have behavioral interviewing, which is the most common. We have case style interviewing, which is more common in consulting type roles. However, we have learned that more industries are adopting a case style interview approach just to assess how their candidates think and problem solve. So it's always useful to get some additional practice with consulting, or I'm sorry, case interviewing. And then there might be some technical skill or assessment portion to assess job specific skills. Then the medium of these interviews might vary. There might be on-site interviews where you are being assessed the moment you get out of your car and walk into the building, and that's always fun. There's phone interviews where you don't have the nonverbals to give you the validation or the confirmation you need that you're doing a good job. So those are always interesting, but definitely a part of interview styles. We have the video interview, the group interview, which is usually for earlier on in your career. And then we have the panel interviews where there'd be multiple interviewers and then one interviewee. So I want to spend some time talking about behavioral style. As I said, they're the most common integrated questions into the interview portion. And we recommend the STAR method when answering behavioral style interviews. So it helps us tell those high impact stories during interviews. And why the STAR story, or why the STAR method is so important, and why employers ask these behavioral style questions, is because they believe past experience predicts future behavior. So you want to think about those 4 to 6 experiences that demonstrate what they need to know and what your value add is. And so I always like to tell students, make sure that you're very intentional with what the employer needs to know, or that skill that you're trying to highlight, and use that language throughout your STAR story. So look at your stories from different angles. How many stories do you have? How can they be adapted to address different questions? Because oftentimes they might ask very similar questions, and you might need to think quickly on your feet. So how can these stories be adjusted? So think about times where you took on a new leadership role, or you overcame a challenge, collaborated with a team, presented or communicated with stakeholders, managed multiple priorities. Some people get asked, when did you fail or get it wrong? How did you learn from that mistake? How did you overcome a barrier? The position description definitely is a useful tool when trying to navigate what to expect, but It's always useful to have those stories handy and readily available to adjust as necessary. Here are some other common interview questions that we find during an interview. We have the most popular one that's found on every interview is tell me about yourself. That's usually how they start off the interview. What would you say is your greatest strength? What would you say is your greatest weakness? Which is often viewed as a trick question. We don't want to talk about the things that we do poorly. We want to talk about areas of growth or improvement. Why are you interested in this position, role, or organization? Where do you see your goals? Where do you see your career? I'm sorry, where do you see your career? What are your career goals and where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? And true to this market, there might be some new questions about how we're navigating change or how we're adapting to uncertainty. When you're thinking about preparing for interviews, there's this concept of storytelling. So what's your narrative? How can you build that out to be compelling to an employer? So we're all in this position of navigating change, right? And we're reintroducing ourselves back into maybe a different industry, role, function, etc. So how are we framing that growth? How is it realignment? How is it, how are we making sense of it to the employer? Because most oftentimes they might see your resume, they might see how you've climbed the ranks in one organization, and then now you're applying for this role. So how are you reframing that to be a positive step in another direction? So some things to consider is how you can connect the dots for them, because it might not be as clear for them to understand why here. Thinking about your why, what does your impact look like, and why here? How can this opportunity help you grow or achieve your goals? How are you making sense of your journey? So perhaps there's something that, a skill that you're trying to develop that you didn't think you needed, but now it makes sense for you to explore that a little bit more. And what are your pocket stories? So pocket stories take us back to those 4 to 6 stories with behavioral style interviewing. And one of our faculty members at Carey, Dr. Cohen, he teaches business communication. He refers to them as pocket stories because they're stories that you can quickly pull out of your pocket and tell and reflect the skill or value add that the employer or company will benefit from. As we know, interviewing is a two-way street. Some people forget that you are interviewing them right back. So as seasoned professionals, it's important to shift from the mindset of proving your worth to an employer to partnering with them. Interviewing is just a conversation, right? So instead of it being this assessment where you're being tested, it's just a conversation to see if there's a matter of fit and value add that you can bring to the company. So when you're thinking about your turn or things that you're looking for in the company or role, and they ask, do you have any questions for us? Show excitement, show curiosity and alignment with opportunity. You see some sample questions you can ask the company, just out of curiosity. But I recommend having 3 to 5 questions readily available to ask during the interview. But other things to be mindful of with the two-way street is don't sell past the close. If you have gotten through the interview and you feel like you might have left something out, or you feel like, oh, I need to make sure that I emphasize this a little bit more, sometimes what you said is enough and you have to trust that and then follow up with a thank you note. So at the end of the interview, trust your responses, and then there's always a moment to share some follow-up. Michelle, I see you popped off.
Yes, we have a question about the pocket stories that you mentioned. So we have been asked to share some pocket stories, what that would sound like. So maybe just go over pocket stories one more time, what you mean by that, and how to develop those. So what are characteristics, for how long? So just review that one more time.
No problem. So pocket stories go back to the star method, or you can also think of them as context towards an answer. For example, if someone asks you what's your greatest strength, you might not leave it at, oh, I'm very good at managing my time. A pocket story might be something you pull out to add context to how you can demonstrate that value of time management. A pocket story in the STAR method might be how you navigate conflict in the workplace and you're building it out using the STAR method, situation, task, action, result. There might also be the second R with reflection so that you can really demonstrate that skill or value add. So pocket story is just having multiple stories that you have selected, carefully selected, that you can adapt to different questions that might be asked in an interview that demonstrate your skill or value add to the company or organization and align with your job role that you're applying for. Did that answer the question? Caitlin, I don't know if you have anything else to contribute.
No, I thought you answered that perfect. Sounds,
Thank you.
I like the pocket stories example.
It gives a good visual, right? Like
It does.
got in my pocket. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So one more don't during an interview is when you're asking questions, you don't want to ask anything that's easily researchable. So if the job description is very thorough, you don't want to ask like, so what will I be doing? You know, you want to make sure that you're asking questions with intention. If there's any information on the website, make sure you really comb through each tab on that website and learn as much as you can. Obviously, you might not have all the context, so you can always ask questions for clarity about certain things that you found in the job description or in the company's website. But you want to try to ask very intentional questions based in curiosity about the opportunity or the company, not just things that you can Google. All in all, we want you to trust your experiences. If you've gotten to the stage of interviewing, that means you can do the job. Right, your resume has done the work, it's gotten you the interview. And if you're on the call or you're in person or on Zoom, they know that you can do the job. It's just you connecting the dots for them. So we really want to remind you of confidence. You don't have to compare yourself to anyone else, any other candidates. You are in your own lane. So your experience is your advantage. No matter what you've been through, you bring that resiliency with you to this opportunity. And you bring a level of maturity that some people who are just starting out in their career, they don't have, or they might not be there yet. And changing careers is brave. So I know it might seem scary, but there's also an excitement about it that just makes your story that much more interesting and fascinating for employers. And let your personality shine through. Authenticity is really important when you're interviewing. Of course, there's more of a polished version of yourself, but you don't want to interview as this incredibly bubbly person. And then when you get the job, that's not how you present at all. So you want to make sure that you're comfortable in those roles or in this opportunity and that they accept you as you are, but there still might be a little more polished version on day one of the interview. Some action items as you are preparing for interview. Prepare your stories, prepare your pocket stories, focus on the STAR method, and again, have a few different stories. And circling back to that, why it's important to have a variety of stories is, again, they might ask very similar questions. So tell me about a time where you had a conflict in the workplace. And then they might follow up with another question. Tell me about a time you disagreed with your supervisor, and that might have been your conflict story. So you want to have a few different versions of stories that, again, you can adapt to the question and focus on how they demonstrate a value add or a skill that they need to know about you. So have those stories and practice. Practice as much as you can. You don't want to over practice, but again, practicing is a skill, right? Or interviewing is a skill that you have to practice. You really want to develop that muscle around your interview skills. So where you're more comfortable talking about yourself. So there's all types of AI platforms that you can explore. There's LinkedIn interview prep, there's Big Interview, VMock. There's so many different resources that you can look into to have that additional practice. Former classmates, friends, family, as Caitlin said, your friends, your immediate network know you better than anyone. So they're able to call out some things that you might not have noticed you do. There might be like a nervous tick that you didn't know you had, and they might be able to point it out for you. And even if they're not industry professionals, they're still there to listen and point out, like maybe you do like too many gestures or something like that. So don't be afraid to ask for help with your immediate network. Focus on feedback around tone, clarity, and conciseness. So what that means is we don't want super long answers. You don't want to lose your audience. So we recommend 3-minute answers, no more than 5, because you want to make sure that you get to the point and you're able to demonstrate what that value add is. Now we understand you're humans. There might take a minute. It might take a minute to get to like, oh, light bulb, that's what I need to get to. But we still want you to practice conciseness where appropriate. Record and review. So even if you're using your phone and you want to do a voice memo or a video, record yourself. That who better to give you feedback than yourself? You might hear your voice, your inflection, and hear that like, oh, I'm talking too fast, or I say a lot, or I'm a gesture, I'm big with my hands, it's distracting. So take that time to really watch and listen to yourself and think back to past interviews that went great, or you felt really uncomfortable afterwards. What threw you off? What do you recall from those experiences that stuck with you, and why? And throughout the interview, we know that there's a stage to it. And generally with interviewing, you don't want to bring up salary first. And they normally have this saying that whoever brings up salary first loses. So we don't want to lead with salary, but being that you all might be career changers, salary expectations might come up in the interview. If it's not posted in the job description, you might want to do some research on industry expectations or industry norms with salary so that you can be prepared to have those negotiation conversations. Some takeaways for today. There's no cookie cutter approach. So between Caitlin and myself, there's no one size fits all. You have to find what makes sense for you, and everyone's experience is different. Everyone's value add looks different. So be sure to find what works for you and that is in alignment with the best practice, and go forward with that. Research as much as you can, because the more informed you are, the better you're suited to connect the dots to your experience and why this position makes sense. And the same goes with your documents. How well do you know yourself? How well do you know the role in the company? Again, that helps you connect those dots. Use AI as a tool. We don't want AI to replace your voice or completely remove any authenticity. So use it as a tool where it makes sense. And practice makes progress. I love that quote because there's no perfection in the job search. So the more you practice, the greater your progress will be. And understand that the job search is a marathon, not a sprint. So it takes some time. Yeah, there's going to be moments where the rejections might come too fast or too frequent, but each opportunity is an opportunity to learn and grow. So that's why it's important to build in that time for reevaluation of your strategy. So maybe you give yourself a realistic timeline of when you need to look at your resume again and be like, okay, I'm not getting interviews. So if you're not getting interviews, there's something with your resume that's not translating in the applicant tracking system or with the hiring manager. So you might need to go back and look again, or look at the keyword optimization. If it's the interview and you're not getting past the interview stage successfully, or you're getting so close, but it's not yielding the outcome that you would like, that's where you might need to look back at your practice, look at your videos, maybe it's your pocket stories. Maybe you're too concise, maybe you're too long, maybe there's so many factors and variables, maybe it has nothing to do with you at all. And there might have been just a more qualified candidate or other reasons that the company was looking at something different that has nothing to do with you. But building in that time for reevaluation is essential to your job search when you're looking at these tactical components, is that time for reflection and seeing what might need to be adjusted so that you can have a more successful outcome moving forward. And as JHU community members, connect with your ILLD team member from your school and learn about their alumni policies, because depending on the alumni policy, depending on how far removed you are from graduation, there might be free resources that you can still utilize here at Hopkins that you can take advantage of to help you navigate this time. So I am going to pause for any questions.
We have a lot of questions. So thank you, Caitlin, Gabrielle. This has spurred a lot of questions. So I'm going to take them. I'm going to start and go back because we have a question about resume. One that, thank you, Caitlin, you answered in the chat. So a question about using AI for cover letters. So what are your thoughts on using AI to help you write those cover letters, or to use it for spelling checks only?
Yes, so this is actually a really timely, since I just got out of a NACE, National Association of Colleges and Employers, had an AI session that I was in, and we talked a lot about what recruiters are seeing on their end. And so I would recommend that you use it in the sense of, you have to be able to use it as a tool, and it can be helpful in helping you craft it as long as it's personalized. So for example, if you just ask AI to generate a cover letter for X organization, It can do that, but the problem is recruiters are getting the exact same cover letters now for all of their candidates. And so, if you want something more personalized and tailored, you have to make sure that you're, asking it to help you generate a cover letter template based on your existing resume and copy and paste your resume into that as well. And the thing is, you have to edit it. It is not, AI is not there to, Gabrielle talked about this too. AI is not there to replace you. AI is there to be a tool to help you get unstuck. So instead of looking at a blank screen for hours upon hours trying to figure out how to start your cover letter, it can help you get unstuck and craft something that is more personalized to the job description and your experience, but you have to go in and edit it and make it sound more like yourself. And you can use customizable GPTs to do that as well. But my recommendation would be to use it smartly, always edit it, because it's not going to be perfect all the time, and you want it's going to miss things that that it needs to have. So that it needs to be tailored for a job description. So if you're not specific when using it, it can actually be a pitfall.
Thanks, Caitlin. Two more resume questions. So this person has been freelancing in different roles over the past year plus, so longer than a year after they were laid off. What's the best way to represent this on a resume? Right now, there's a big gap. So how to represent freelancing on your resume?
Yes, I'll post something in the chat as well. That's a good resource for that, but similar to how you would talk about project experience, you would talk about your freelance experience. So, you would write, freelance and then the name of a project that you did, and then describe in bullet point statements the work that you did and the dates that you accomplished that role. And you would do it for each project that you've been doing, because it showcases that there is work being done. You are working. You're not necessarily not doing anything. So that you want to show that since I think you had said that it was a layoff. I think since the layoff, I've been doing freelance work, and again, just treating it like project experience. But I'll post that in the chat as well, that helpful resource, to see how that looks.
Thanks, Caitlin. And last one so far about resumes is it okay to ignore the request for your address on the application, or does the applicant, so ATS, for those that don't know, stands for Applicant Tracking System. Or does the ATS block you if you do not submit it in full? While Caitlin's working on that, I'll just say on your resume, you don't have to put your address. If you wanted to show you were in a certain city, you could put city and state, but you don't have to put your address anymore. Now, if it's in the ATS system and they're asking you and it's a required question, I don't think you can bypass putting your address on your application or your profile as you complete a profile, but just wanted also Gabrielle and Caitlin to chime in. But if it's building your profile on the actual system, I don't think you can bypass that, but you don't have to put it on your resume.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. Is that on the system itself that they use for profiles, it would be, if they have it as being required, you would need to complete it. But yes, not for the resume, you're not required.
Okay. So now moving into interviews, and we have this question from 40 some minutes ago. So appreciate you waiting, Stephanie. We talked, we're not covering it necessarily today. Next session is on networking, actionable networking, where we'll talk more about coffee chats, but how best to interact in an in-person coffee chat with an employer versus an actual interview. So would there be differences in how you would approach a prospective employer with a coffee chat versus an interview?
So a coffee chat is a little more informal than an actual interview, but it's your opportunity to get as much information as possible. It's an opportunity of research, right? It's a method of researching and collecting information. So with the coffee chat, you might be asking a question about a person's career journey, where it's more about you asking the questions versus being asked the questions. So you're leading with curiosity, you're asking about their career path, you're asking it some industry specific questions, what might help somebody find success in this industry. You might ask other questions about their career journey, how any certifications that were useful that helped them be more marketable in the market. There might be some other questions about like anyone else you can connect with to learn more about X role or X company. So you're asking more of the questions to collect information in a coffee chat versus being in the hot seat in the actual interview. But it also serves as a great opportunity to establish a networking dynamic or a mentee mentor type of relationship, which I'm sure will be covered in the next session.
Yes, so we've been putting the Adapt series on our chat, but we have, let's see, the next session, I don't have the webpage pulled up yet. There we go, thank you. The next session is on April 22nd. So that would be definitely one you would want to attend to talk about kind of those coffee chats and networking. All right, so we've got 5 more questions so far. So quick responses. So what tips do you have for answering the tell me about yourself question?
That's the age-old question, right? The first
Yeah.
question always. So what you don't want to do, or what we don't recommend, because you can do a lot of things, but what we don't recommend is just repeating everything that's on your resume. They have it in front of them, so you don't need to just walk them through your resume. I was told this acronym early on in my career, which was EES, Education, Employment, Skills. So you want to create a narrative of how you landed in this seat interviewing for this role. So you might briefly reference your resume. As you see, I went to Johns Hopkins and I studied XYZ. You might also talk about how your experiences led you to this interest. So I had several roles. You might generalize it. I had several roles in this industry or in this function. But what I really became curious about was X. And then that made me want to explore so and so and so and so. So education, employment, skills is what has been useful when you're structuring your tell me about yourself answer and keeping you organized so that you're not just kind of going off and talking about your childhood or something that's not a demonstrated value add to the company. I don't know if Michelle or Caitlin, you have anything else to add, but I think that's the quickest and easiest way I tend to organize responses.
Yeah, I agree. I think once you're in the interview, they already know you're qualified. They've already seen your resume. So reiterating it is not necessary. They're really just trying to get to know who you are and how you work. And so keeping it brief and I liked how you said that, Gabrielle, keeping it to how you got to the position that you're in that seat and why you're interested potentially in that role too is a helpful starting point.
Yeah, lead with the destination, lead with that discussion you're having in place right then. And either the transferable skills that brought you there or the direct relevant experience. And then just making sure you're always connecting it with what that interviewer, that organization is looking for. Okay, so another specific interview question. I was once asked, tell me about a time when you had to say sorry at work. It felt like a trick question. I checked Google, Reddit, and it seems that it was. Can you maybe dissect this interview question? I've got some thoughts, but I'll throw it to you all.
I also have some thoughts.
Yeah.
Because I was once asked, what is one thing that your coworkers will be annoyed with you? And I was like, oh my gosh, like they're looking for self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big piece of this question too. So tell me a time that you've had to say sorry at work is really looking at your level of self-awareness and looking at how you own up to, like, if there was a mistake that was made, how you handled that situation. And so that's how I would answer, or that's how I would, whenever those seemingly trick questions come up, it's that they're looking for that self-awareness piece and how you responded in those situations.
Yeah, perfect answer, Caitlin. I would just add the emphasis on reframing. So saying sorry is something that I would be taken aback by real time. But to Caitlin's point, they really want that mistake. So using that language to reframe it, just like the weakness question. Tell me about your weaknesses. It might just be an area of growth I have is, or something I've improved upon was. So I know it's easy said right now because we're not in the hot seat, right? But taking a moment to collect your thoughts and seeing how you can reframe the question strategically would be useful.
Another example is tell me about a time you failed. So again, the accountability, the self-reflection, yeah, and just being, and it can also give you a sense of perhaps the workplace culture. So maybe they had an issue in the past with an employee that, would make mistakes left and right. We all do, but like would just not be accountable to it and just was blaming others. So it all comes from somewhere. So it's not necessarily a trick question, but it can give you insights into the potential culture of the team that you might be entering into. And it may not be a red flag. It may be, but it may not be.
I think the other thing too is to not feel rushed to answer questions like that. Like feel free
really
to
good.
say like, oh, that's a really good question. Let me take a second to think about it and like recollect yourself, because those types of questions can catch you off guard. So don't feel like you have to rush in any of your questions, any of your responses, but
yeah, take a sip of water. Think about it for a second.
Ponder that question.
Ask them to repeat it. Buy yourself time.
So we've got 3 more questions in the Q&A. So in an interview, there have been times when the panel will go over the job and what it entails, because it might be a new role or just very unique to the organization. The job post, so I think this is from a very specific example. The job post is also relatively vague. So they're going over the job. It's a little vague. In that case, is it okay to ask more questions on what I would be doing if I got the job?
Absolutely. And you definitely should. If it's vague, you want to have a good understanding of what you might be getting yourself into. And I always like to say it's not what you ask, it's how you ask. So when you're leading with curiosity, how are you framing the question? So it looks like it's not that you don't know, you're just asking for clarity on what your roles are or what your role will be and what success would look like for someone in that role. But there's no issue with asking those clarifying questions when you're dealing with a vague job description.
Yeah. You could say something like, to get kind of that real sense of the first few months is like, what would be a metric of success in the first 90 days of this role? Just to give you some idea of those specifics, because they might be still figuring it out. Okay. All right, so we're back to resume. So if your experience predates more than 10 years and you've asked for a healthcare role, how do you collate it to 2 pages only? So I don't think it's specific to healthcare, but like if you have a lot of work experience, how do you distill it down to just 2 pages?
And this was over 10 years?
Yeah, over 10 years of experience. I've
I'm
seen
sorry,
long page resumes for less than 10 years of experience. So just how do you take a lot of experience and bring it down to 2 pages, especially maybe with someone who's more used to working with a CV versus which can be however long, to then a resume that really shouldn't go beyond 2 pages.
Yeah, there's a couple ways you can do it, and this would be an example of where you'd want definitely somebody to look at your specific resume or CV to give you personalized feedback. But in general, having not seen it, some things you can do would be looking at the length. How many statements do you have for each experience that you have? Because if you have a lot of experience, you may want to shorten that to 5 statements, or what are your top accomplishments in those roles, instead of listing everything, so that will condense it a little bit more for industry versus like a resume versus a CV type of situation. So that's one way that you can do it. There's also those are the main things that come to mind when shortening it, but picking the positions that are most relevant versus additional experiences might help you shorten it. Again, having somebody take a look at it for your personal situation would be best in this case.
You don't have to write everything that you've done in the job, especially if it's one of the older jobs. Like again, I think it was Gabrielle that mentioned it in the interview part, but it's all kind of the same. What is important for the reader to know about you? What are they going to want to know? It's not going to be necessarily about the very detailed pieces of a job 10, 15 years ago. That would just maybe require
And I
5
believe
bullets.
it's really only up to 5 to 8 years of experience, right? For resumes.
Yeah,
That is like
you could,
the,
you
the
could focus on that and
standard.
have an employment history. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So, yeah. And again, back to, each Hopkins school has different policies with how we work with alumni, but I believe all do work with alumni in some capacity. So also contact your different schools' career division to see what support you can get for reviewing documents or just having any kind of feedback. All right, one more question. So this is calling back to similar to kind of that freelance experience question. How can you present your startup founder experience? I've heard it seems too much to put CEO or founder on your resume. Instead, people should use manager or director role. Thoughts?
I mean, I personally,
I wouldn't go away from the founder or CEO.
no, I
don't
would
think
disagree
that's-
from that. If you're a founder, you're a founder.
Yeah.
Don't think that sounds too much at all. So, and I've seen plenty of undergraduate students who have founded companies who have CEO or founder on it. It's valid leadership experience if you have that position and if you have that startup that you've worked on or that you're still currently working on. I think that you should highlight that for sure. Format wise, it would go in the same way that you have your other experiences listed, but CEO or founder is not too much.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everybody. That's all the questions that we see. Would you mind putting up the dates slide one more time, Gabrielle? So next week, we have Caitlin and Gabrielle and myself back this evening. If you want a refresher or have another question that pops up that you want to join in and ask, we'll be doing this again from 5 to 6. Next week, April 14th, we'll be having our open networking chats again. This is just open topics for anyone that wants to come and talk with each other, with career coaches, open chats, and then we'll be talking about actionable networking to close out our series on April 22nd from 12 to 1 and 5 to 6. So thank you, and please give us feedback on your thoughts on this series in the link that the Adapt, Pivot, and Persist person put in the chat. So thank you all so much. Oh, and sharing the registration. Adam, can you share that registration link again for the series website? You have it queued up. Okay, it's been put into the chat. Yafan. So, all right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Caitlin and Gabrielle. Appreciate it, and we'll see you tonight.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.